Good evening, this is Pesach TV bringing you the evening news. Tonight's breaking news: after years of abject slavery, 10 plagues have hit ancient Egypt. As we speak, there is news that Pharaoh has suddenly decided to give the freedom fighter Moses 24 hours to get his people to pack their bags, bake a load of bread, and leave Egypt for good. Reporting tonight, we have our hieroglyphic reporters from all over Egypt. First, we go to Giza, the world's greatest slave camp, where our first reporter, Mr. Aswan Dam, will give us the background to this unprecedented event. Aswan, I'm sure it's hot out there. Over to you. Thousands of years ago, when there were no trucks, no cars, no cranes, no ropes, and no Lego, the mighty Pharaoh of Egypt, who wished to build great buildings and statues, forced slaves to work day and to work nights. They had little food, no money, and the slave drivers forced them to build. This was no life. One day, a man called Moshe, or Moses, who lived in Pharaoh's palace, got really fed up watching the poor and starving people, and he decided to hatch a plan. Not quite knowing what to do, he walked into the desert, where he had a dream of a burning bush. Amazingly, this bush didn't burn out like a log fire, and what's more, the bush actually spoke and said to Moses, "I have a really good idea, you know. You know Pharaoh well. Why not go to him and ask him to show some kindness and free the slaves?" What a good idea. So Moses went to Pharaoh. Aswan, thank you for reminding us of how hot and sweaty it must have been working for that tyrant Pharaoh. And you were the first reporter to interview Moses about that burning bush. I'm a little worried that bush might add to global warming, but it sure gave Moses the courage to have a chat with Pharaoh. Next to our reporter, Mr. River Nile, who is right now outside Pharaoh's palace. Mr. Nile, bring us the breaking news of what happened when Moses started the negotiations. Over to you.
So Moses and his brother Aaron plucked up courage and confronted the slave master Pharaoh. Pharaoh wasn't too impressed by Moses and was about to send him off to become a slave when Aaron performed a magic trick. To this day on, no one knows how he did this trick, but in front of Pharaoh, the mighty slave driver, he threw down his walking stick and it magically turned into a quite scary snake that luckily was not poisonous. Pharaoh also had a few magicians who changed their sticks into snakes. But you know what happens next. Aaron's tricky snakes gobble up all the slave master's snake and then turns back into a walking stick. Moses stood up straight and said to the great slave driver Pharaoh, "Now will you let my people go?" And despite the snake episode, Pharaoh replied, "No, 1,000 times no. And my slaves will work even harder and will receive less food and water."
Thank you, Mr. Nile. I know you managed to get some footage of the non-poisonous snake magic performed by Aaron and how it gobbled up the magic tried by Pharaoh's magician. I wonder whether you could now show us that footage. Thanks again, Mr. Nile, for sneaking into the palace and streaming that live feed. Just a reminder that this is Pesach TV bringing you breaking news all the way from Cyprus Gardens. Our next reporter is Mr. Sphinx, who's reporting right next to the Sphinx. Good evening, Mr. Sphinx. We've been updated on what's going on in the palace. Can you tell us now what you anticipate might happen now that the negotiations with Pharaoh have collapsed?
We all want the freedom to live where we choose. go to school, learn to read and write, and have family members and friends of our own choosing. No pharaoh or modern-day dictator should tell us with whom we can and can't live our lives and play. Almost everyone on every continent craves to live in peace, practice their beliefs in harmony, have a secure job and access to medical care when they fall ill. We all deserve to eat healthy food and drink clean water. The Passover story let us know what eventually happened to slave drivers and dictators. All the horrid things they do to their slaves or subjects eventually turns on them, and terrible tyrants eventually get their just desserts. The 10 plagues in the Passover story is a reminder to all awful dictators and oppressors that despite their cruelty, those who fight hard for freedom eventually break free. It can be very hard to get rid of nasty pharaohs and dictators like Hitler and Assad. The Passover story reminds us how hard it can be to win freedom. Indeed, it took not 1, but 10 increasingly nasty plagues before the stubborn pharaoh eventually got the message and let his slaves free.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sphinx, for your careful analysis of what happens to nasty dictators. Eventually, freedom prevails, but when I last heard from our reporters, it looked like the talks had failed. Hang on, I'm just getting news from... Oh, there's some more breaking news. I've got Professor Tutankhamun on the line. Toot, what's happening?
Now, let's remind you of the 10 plagues. First, the river Nile turned to blood. Afterwards, there were frogs everywhere, in every school, in every house. Following the frogs, the next plague was lice in Pharaoh's hair. That plague was followed by lions, hyenas, and wolves roaming the streets, the parks, and the gardens. The following plague was chicken pox on all the chickens and cowpox on all the cows. When that plague had affected all the chickens and cows, boils, thunderstorm, and lightning affected all of Egypt. Then a plague of locusts followed that ate almost every scrap of food. Still, after all these plagues, Pharaoh said, "No, I will not let you go." This brought the next plague of 3 days of darkness, when neither the sun, nor the moon, nor the stars shone. Finally, the last plague was a corona-like plague, with lots of people falling sick. This meant that all the schools were closed. Pharaoh was sneezing and coughing and becoming sick and tired of all the plagues and the school closures and the pyramids not being built and not being very good at homeschooling for his children. He realized that an exit strategy was necessary. He decided that social distancing was needed. In desperation, he called Moses and said, "I give up. Moses, there are some future Nobel Prize winners amongst the Israelites. Take your Israelite people out of Egypt and across the Red Sea to Israel. There the Israelites would be free. There they can work together with the rest of the world on digital case-finding apps and vaccines and treatments so that we can get out of this."
Well, thanks for the update, Toot. Looks like things are moving. Hope there's some bread in the shops, although goodness knows how the slaves are going to be able to pack their bags and make all that bread in just 24 hours. Wow, just got some news from our other reporter, Mr. Afikomen. What's happening, Afi?
Pharaoh made a condition of release. Moses and all the 12 tribes of Israel had to leave very, very, very quickly. He gave them 24 hours to pack their bags, books, food and water, goats and camels, and head off for the Red Sea, which is their route away from slavery to freedom. Pharaoh made a condition of release. Moses and all the 12 tribes of Israel had to leave very, very, very quickly. He gave them 24 hours to pack their bags, books, food and water, goats and camels, and head off for the Red Sea, which is their route away from slavery to freedom. This was a huge ask for thousands of people destined to spend 40 years walking through the Sinai desert on their way to Canaan. So Moses called a meeting with his people and told them to speedily bake loads of bread to eat whilst on the long and arduous walk from Egypt to the Red Sea. However, there was a problem. Before breaking bread, yeast has to be added to the flour and water mixture. The yeast, when warmed, allows the dough to rise and expand into bread dough, and this takes a few hours. There was no time for this.
Oh, thanks, Mr. Afikomen. By the way, you'd better hide yourself now because the Tillingham and Stratford tribes are looking for you and they might just eat you up. We've now got our last reporter waiting to give us the last breaking news. I'm not sure whether it's Ms. Dayenu or Mrs. Khagadia. Who's there? I'm listening. Oh, we've got a poor line. Ah, it's Ms. Dayenu. That would be enough. Hello, Miss D. What have you got to tell us?
But there was no time to add yeast and allow the dough to rise, so they mixed flour and water, popped it into the stone oven, and 20 minutes later made a delicious flatbread called matzah. So tonight at the Seder we remember the story of a fight of all people who struggled to break the chains of slavery. Let's remember that whilst we in the UK are pharaohs, slave masters and dictators, and whilst we enjoy a nutritious and tasty meal, there remain suffering and starving peoples across the world with almost no food or water, no medical care, and no hope of ever learning to read or write or play. Moses was the first freedom fighter, and he has been followed by many other men and women who have led people from oppression to freedom.
Well, that's this evening's breaking news. And thank you to all our intrepid reporters from all over Egypt explaining to us why this night is different from all other nights. Until next time, from Seder TV broadcasting from Cyprus Gardens, good night and enjoy the matzah. This is Bitter Herb signing off.